When the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan in August 2021, women's rights were drastically eroded, including access to education. Now, 120 women have found hope and community on the other side of the world at the River Nile School, a small independent school in North Melbourne. This is truly an amazing story, and I'm privileged to have as our guest Principal Charles Hertzog. I'm Ian Bunston. Welcome to Monday Matters. Welcome, Charles. Great to have a chat with you this morning.
Likewise, thanks so much for having me, Ian.
Our pleasure. And I should add that we're going to be joined two of your students later in the program. Charles, I want to start by asking you a fairly direct question. Why do you think you're the principal at the River Nile School?
Well, I suppose like most of us, Ian, we look for meaningful work. I'm lucky and I work in a sector in education that there are multiple places to find that. Any place that's a school or serving young people is doing really important work, and I've worked in different types of institutions in that field. I feel a particular affinity with our community and really lucky to be able to serve them. Obviously, I don't have the experiences and life that they've had. I've had a really privileged existence. School was given to me and was uninterrupted. My family had a lot of support and we were able to navigate all of the government structures around that for me to be able to continue to learn. But I think there is a really inspiring story behind our students and what they go through on a daily basis to get to the point that they would like to be educated. So having that community feel and knowing some of the decisions that I make will impact them positively is part of why I do what I do. I also think as I've moved further and further away from students as my career's gone on, still I have my door next to a classroom here, but not teaching as I once was, to be able to know that the decisions that you're making, the meetings that you're having, the policies that you're changing are going to be doing something impactful, really helps. And then I was thinking about this as I was considering this job. I moved here about 18 months ago from another position. I think each of the experiences that I've had has led to here in one small step in a way. So I started to get to know Melbourne's South Sudanese refugee community probably about 15 to 17 years ago. My wife and I worked with some families on a volunteer basis out in the West. At a literacy center, and it very quickly became the best part of our week and our weekends, getting to learn from these families and get a sense of what they do. We founded our own chapter of that literacy center in Fitzroy from the Atherton Gardens Commission Housing about maybe 12 years ago. We moved overseas and worked in Brooklyn in the States for about 7 years. We worked in Coney Island in a community of largely black and brown families working to get college education. I worked in school leadership there. So I have now probably a long history of working with and serving communities that I'm not from, learning from them and trying to create space for them and learning a lot about myself in that process.
So, Charles, what does a typical day at the River Nile School look and sound like?
Look, school feels like school. So I think if you walked into a classroom, you would feel and what you would feel and see in other high schools. We have a later start and an earlier finish to our day. So we start at 10 o'clock and we finish at 3:15. For those of your listeners that know Melbourne, you could probably imagine on a map where our community come from. So we have some folks in inner city and Sunshine and Footscray, but a lot of our young women travel a long way to get to our school. So they travel from Melton in the north and in Hume, and from the west in Wyndham, and from Dandenong and Casey in the southeast. So we start later to allow our friends to get to school in that capacity. One of our young women travels from Kurrajong, which is takes her about an hour to get to Melton, and then comes from Melton via train. So we have some flexibility when we start and when we finish. We have a pretty standard setup, I think, in terms of, literacy in the first block, numeracy, recess, lunch, and then our electives and vet courses. I think probably the tangible difference that people see and feel when they come into our school is just the uniqueness of our student cohort, all being young women and all being from refugee backgrounds. And there is a feeling and sentiment among the student cohort that is really different to anything that I've experienced before. I worked previously, prior to this role, in a different school in Melbourne for young people that have been disengaged from education. And I mentioned I worked in the States, and they all have their own feel. But I don't think I've experienced probably the gratitude and camaraderie that I've experienced at this school before. I think each of our young women have had school removed from them at some point without their choice. So they've really had to advocate and actively decide to come back to education, whether it's they're recently arrived in the country and that's a priority for them, and they've really advocated to have that, whether it's through their services or to their family, or whether they've been in Australia for a long period of time and become disengaged due to their trauma and what they've experienced. I think I was probably anticipating coming into this role that because there's such a plethora of languages and countries represented at our school, that people might really cluster in those community groups and diasporic spreads. But the opposite is really true. It's more than any other place that I've worked. There's a real connection across different cultural lines and a real affinity with each other. I think part of it is because people have made that active choice to represent their own education. There's an understanding that other people here have gone through similar things to them. And a real deep gratitude to be able to have that educational experience.
Charles, I first became aware of the River Nile School when I read a wonderful article in the Age, the Saturday Age, a couple of weeks back, and it really stood out to me the strong focus on developing meaningful pathways for students to allow them to fully engage in life in Australia. Can you give us an example where this has happened with one or some of the students?
Yeah, it's a nice part about our school, I think, because we're only a senior secondary school. So when our young women come to us, they're really only here for these 2 years of high school to finish their VCE. We do have flexible delivery from our regulatory body, which allows us to stretch that out over up to 4 years. So some of our young women might spend the first year doing really intensive English with us before they transition into some of the other course requirements. But it means that when our students finish, or as soon as they come, really, they need to, most of them are really clear on what they want to do. And really different sorts of expectations. So some people have been at school for the first time in 10 years and really acclimating to that and wanting to prioritize English. And some of our students have started a tertiary study in their own country or a bridging country, but really need to start again because that qualification wasn't recognized or their literacy is now in a different language. But our graduating students move straight into the next part of their lives. So to see some of our students from last year's class come back in their nurses' scrubs or, with their architecture material and talk through what they're going through, where their placements are, is really inspiring for us. And because it happens quickly, and a lot of our young women have earning money as a priority and family responsibilities. They might be sending money back to a bridging country to try and bring further people over. They're really often looking for immediate pathways to be qualified in the next thing. So there's really tangible results there that our current students can see. We've also started a program to hire an alumni person each year directly. So last year we employed a graduating student into a classroom learning support role, and we'll do that again next year. So that's the first time we ran that program this year, and we were anticipating someone moving from a student to a staff role to take a lot of time and a lot of mentoring and potentially some teething problems. But they were so incredible in what they were able to do and how they presented. They really just seemed as a fully fledged professional from day one. They're going to move to a different school next year and open up that pathway for another person coming in, graduating this year as well.
So, Charles, moving to my next question, in some ways you've already touched on it, but in terms of just setting a context, I'm thinking of those that are in education, teachers,
Mm.
principals, assistant principals. There are often many occasions where they see a life significantly changed, and that's what you kind of go into the profession in many ways for. In your role as principal, has there been a special time when you've seen a significant life that's been changed around?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky and we're lucky in that regard because nearly everyone's story is a little bit like that. There are so many variables for a young woman when they come to a new country, so many things to navigate from education to language to social services to their family to their visa status to Centrelink. So, having the supports that we offer can often be a really integral part of that. With a couple of young women that have arrived in the last 2 years from really rural parts of Afghanistan, that didn't learn to read or write in their own language of Pashto. So just the process of going to school for them is new, and the enabling factor of that to be around other women that have either had that happen to them or are working to achieve a similar thing. You will all know some of the restrictions placed on women by the Taliban. So to be able to catch public transport by themselves, to be able to career plan, to be able to dance, to be able to wear things that they choose to wear, as well as studying as a right, and learning language and writing language is just a really empowering process and allows a young woman to, some of these two young women specifically, to really have their natural talents and abilities come to the surface.
That's wonderful. When I read the article, the other aspect that stood out to me was the fact of a pending possible award that the school might be up for. And I'm just going to read this. The River Nile School is an unassuming school on Cable Street, North Melbourne. It is a finalist for Educational Platform T4's award for World's Best School for Overcoming Adversity, alongside schools in Uganda, England, Latin America, Pakistan, and war-torn Palestine. How do you feel about that possibility of that award?
Oh, I think we feel really proud of our community. I mean, everyone in our community works really hard. I think our young women make daily choices and sacrifices to educate themselves, and our staff are very, as you can imagine, mission aligned in all roles, ranging from accounting to teachers to well-being staff. They choose the school very specifically because they feel connected to the mission, because they believe in the rights of young women and the status of young women to get education. So we feel proud that our work's recognised. I think internally, knowing that there are two schools operating in Palestine, we probably don't want to win. I think we would really love for them to have that recognition and the financial bonus that comes with that. But the recognition's nice, and then just having that small amount of media exposure brought in so much goodwill and so many people that wanted to partner with us. So one of the really beautiful things about being in this role is that it shows me that there's a real community appetite to support young refugee women, that crosses political lines. People feel connected to the idea that young women deserve education and that if someone comes to Australia, they deserve the same things that people like me got. So just that community sentiment that comes from the recognition was really beautiful as well.
Well, Charles, we wish you well with the award, possibly coming. I do hear your sentiments about the schools in Palestine, but it's wonderful to hear your story, and it should be celebrated. The way that your school is going about changing lives of folk, of young women who have suffered incredible adversity and have incredible stories to tell. And we wish you well, and we thank you very much for help you sharing your story here at Monday Matters today.
Thanks so much, Ian. Thank you for having me.